of all counts. All right, what's next? Well, there'll be a pre-sentencing report put together in about 3 months or so. The judge didn't set a date, but he said about 3 months or so there will be a hearing and a sentencing that will take place. She is facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. Not sure it's going to go any other way. All right, joining us here for this hour, criminal defense attorney Jessica Bublitz and former criminal defense attorney Kirk Nurmi. Thank you both for joining me. First and foremost, obviously, I have to get your reaction to this verdict. Jessica, I'll start with you.
Well, it's great to see the grandparents feeling so vindicated after all this time and happy standing out there in front of our courthouse today. It has been a long and horrible process for them. As we know, Larry Woodcock was just suffering just a couple of days ago from health effects from the stress of all of this on him and the toll that it's been taking. I think everybody in that courthouse feels a sense of relief. I am somewhat surprised that all counts were found guilty. I was pretty confident that the counts with regard to the conspiracy would be found guilty, but the actual murder counts as well was a little bit of a surprise. But as they stated, the prosecution did an excellent job of this case and laying it out the way that they did in a very comprehensive and lineal sort of manner. It all just made sense in the end when it came together. And so it was really brilliantly done by them. So I guess, yeah, my feeling is good job, and it's good to see them all so happy.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I agree with you. I think what really brought it all together for me, I mean, again, it was a ton of information, but it were the timelines. Once they started showing you the timelines of the phone calls and the GPS, it all really started to make sense to me. Kirk Nurmi, your response.
You know, one of the things I really want to say is praise. I think it's something we don't see often enough when we talk about this trial, is for Larry and Kay to come out on the steps with every right to hate, with every right to be angry, to come out and say love always wins, and to mention Tammy as well, someone they didn't know. I thought that was so powerful of a statement when we have these trials and the vitriol that can be around them. To kind of bring peace and harmony to this situation is so important. Now, as the trial itself, I'm not surprised. So yes, you could make the argument that, especially as it related to Tammy, there might have been a little bit of lack of evidence, and I think that's why we saw about 6 hours for the verdict to be reached. But ultimately, the case was pretty cut and dry. As complicated as it was, using the themes of power, sex, and money really kind of consolidated the state's case into a really tangible thing that jury could take back to the room and deliver the verdict that the state was seeking in this case, and I believe the just verdict as well.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Jessica, I think using that power, sex, money thing is really what took it out of the religious aspect. They made the point a couple of times in closing and throughout the trial that this wasn't about religion. This was about money, sex, and power. I think it kept everyone focused in on those themes, which was really important to their case. But I want to go back to something you said earlier regarding, and I agreed with you, that the murder charges were the ones that a lot of us were skeptical. Like, do they have enough on that? Explain to me why you think they came back with the verdict that they did. My understanding of the law is that she didn't necessarily, at least the way it was put out there in closing arguments, she didn't necessarily have to put her hands to commit these murders. If she facilitated it, if she did some act or aided in it in some way, then they could find her guilty of murder. Is that your understanding?
That is true, and that's the way the instructions read, and likely that's why they found the way they did. Procured it, brought it about, aided and abetted, all those things, that she was directly involved. So it wasn't just an agreement that this would happen, but that she was directly involved in some way, not that she actually herself physically committed the act of murder, which there wasn't really any evidence of that. But they did a brilliant job with, as you say, I mean, they painted a picture of love, sex, and money well. I was extremely skeptical that it had anything really to do with any of those things in the very beginning. Certainly just thought it was a woman caught up in her delusions of religion. And I do think there was a lot of that. I think that she is still caught up in that, you know. Even when they read the verdict and before the reading of the verdict, she still had that somewhat flippant air about her that was so surprising to see right before they read a verdict. You know, I've been in their position of these attorneys so many times, and I can tell you that's a very intense moment and deserves respect. And she and they seemed to be taking it lightly for the moment that it was until they actually heard the verdict. So that just goes towards her personality, her delusion, all these things that have come together in this trial. But yeah, I think they did a good job. The money, sex, all of that, they brought all of that together with the evidence that they had through all of these messages and everything else.
Yeah, no doubt. And Kirk, you know what's interesting? Word is that she's been upset since closing arguments, or maybe even before, but at least definitely since closing arguments at her attorneys for their characterization of Chad. Tell me what that might be like. Have you ever had a client who's upset at you for really doing your job? And we all pretty much agreed, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that that was the best way to go. You had to go after Chad.
Yeah, you know, Michael, it happens all the time, especially in a case. You know, Lori Vallow is not the kind of client that any defense attorney is going to want. They're taking the case out of obligation to the court, or they are assigned to the case, they're ordered to it. They're not going to want to be there, right? So, and in addition, you think about Lori and her delusions. We just talked about that a minute. I believe she's hung on to those delusions throughout this case. I mean, I believe they were powerful enough for her to help her facilitate. I believe she knew what was going to happen to her kids. She kind of aided and abetted that in terms of having Alex Cox and Chad Daybell commit these murders. And I think she has to, once that happened, she ultimately had to cling to it, because to not cling to it would be to accept the evilness of her action. So in that regard, she's probably fighting with her attorneys tooth and nail about any of this. To her, it's a distraction. It's just an illusion. She's going to get lifted up to be one of the 144,000, whatever she has going on in her head. This is where her mindset is, and this is the position she's taking with her attorney. And probably the biggest thing that the attorneys could do would be to upset her standing with the prophet, because if she has no standing, her belief of the prophet, I should clarify, she doesn't have any standing in that world anymore. And that's all she has right now, is this hope that somehow in the afterlife or some time in the future, she's going to be taken from prison and gone to this Shangri-La, being one of the 144,000.
You know, and it goes back to what she told her son Colby in a phone call. She said, in time, you'll understand. She probably feels that way for all the rest of us. At some time, we'll ultimately understand. Yep. Jessica, you know, the other verdict here that might have been in question was whether she'd be found guilty of this conspiracy to kill Tammy. What are your thoughts on that? I mean, my position was always, if you bought the overall conspiracy, then Tammy was just swept up in all of that.
Right, and that's where I think the emphasis on the light and the dark spirits and the overriding goals of sex and money and being with this man and the timing of it, all of that circumstantial evidence had to really be made clear for the jury of her motive in all of this, what she was looking for, and then the justification of using the religion in such a diabolical way to justify getting rid of people who are in the way of this vision she had of her life. That's the prosecution story, and that's what worked. And so, I think that's why they were convinced that her involvement was just as much with Tammy as with the kids.
Yeah, it was all part of that evil scheme. Kirk Nurmi, I only have about 30 seconds to go here. Some final words on a case that we've been following for years.
Like I say, I really love Larry and Kay focusing on love. I think that's so important. I think there's a lot of relief in this courtroom that justice was delivered. I think all the attorneys are relieved to have this kind of move on from their lives. And let's hope that that Larry and Kay is right, and love continues to win, not only in our world in general, but in our criminal justice system.
Fair enough. Love always wins. Let's hope those words are truer than they've been in the past. All right, Jessica Bublitz and Kirk Nurmi, thank you so much for joining us this hour. Truly appreciate it. Coming up, Daybell will continue with the coverage of Lori Daybell, found guilty of all charges. This is Court TV, your front row seat to justice.
Question number 1. In regards to count 1 of the amended indictment, is Lori Marie Vallow not guilty or guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan and grand theft by deception? Answer, guilty.
Welcome back to Court TV Live. I'm Michael Ayala. Lori Vallow Daybell found guilty of all counts. After 60 witnesses, 6 weeks of trial, the verdict was read. During the verdict, Kay and Larry Woodcock, apparently they were in tears. All the jurors, they were straight-faced. You could hear sniffles around the courtroom as well, and apparently some law enforcement were emotional. Now, after the trial, we heard from Kay and Larry Woodcock, and they thanked law enforcement for all the wonderful work and all the time put in to this case. Remember, it was Larry Woodcock's and Kay Woodcock's question, where are the children that started this entire thing? And at the end of his press conference there at the end, he did have some words. He was asked, what are your final words to Lori Vallow Daybell now that she's been convicted? And essentially he sang a song. I won't try to sing it for you, but at the end of the day, he said, turn out the lights, the party is over, and it is over. It has ended. So essentially that's the message he had for Lori, and that indeed is how and where we stand right now. Let me bring in our Court TV crime and justice correspondent, Matt Johnson. Matt is standing by outside that Ada County courthouse. Matt, what do you have?
Well, you know what? Inside the courtroom on the 4th floor at the Ada County Courthouse, it was almost a standing room only. People were told that they needed to be not sharing their emotions as the verdict was read. Much different story out in front of this courthouse here, where this was a change of venue. People drove for miles, for hours to be here. And during that moment, they were listening with their cell phones, watching online, and then cheers erupted out in front of the courthouse as she was found guilty on all counts. You can hear probably there were people honking their horns. And you know, it's